Stuff away. So, what was today's question? Guys, quiet. What's today's question?
What is the criteria?
Yeah, either first or fourth hour before or after school. Okay? So I'll be here after school for you to talk. Okay, so what was the criteria? The question is, what is the criteria for?
No, that's not it.
Okay, so what's the question?
What are some things we need to pay attention to when we're cutting minors on it?
Okay, so what are some things that we need to pay? So first off, what are the miters again?
Angle cuts.
The angle cuts, right? So on our legs here, you have the miters. So again, a miter cut is any angle other than 90 degrees that is cut on your leg or on your material. So we're for making these miter cuts on your legs. What are some things that you need to pay attention to? The angle, okay, so obviously we want to make sure that we end up having a square or 90 degree corner when we're done and assembling them. What else? What are some of the things that are on the grading rubric for your corners, for your leg assembly? Well, what do you guys notice about these legs here? Square. They're square, okay, so that goes back. What about the actual joints themselves?
They're really tight.
Okay, so they're nice and tight. Okay, so there's not any waves or anything like that. They're lined up so the bottom and the top edges are flush. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we'll talk about some things to keep in mind. We'll go over that videos that you were supposed to watch for today, the main points. Then what we'll do is we'll be out in the lab and I'll kind of show you guys through what the your cleanup assignments are, because we have the sign-up sheet, like whose responsibility is what, but we haven't really gone over it, so that's what we'll be doing today, and that'll pretty much take us to the end of the hour. Okay, so let's get this set up. So again, the goal for the end of the week today, or for the end of the week by Friday, is to have your legs cut to the final thickness, or you can actually leave one on. The goal is to have, guys, your legs cut to final thickness, and then to rip to final width, and then to either have the miters along your edges so that the sides can fit into that, or to have your miters cut. Okay, so that's the goal. I'm not going to be checking that, but some things to keep. Some things to keep in mind when you're dealing with width or ripping it is to make sure that you're ripping them all at the same time. Okay, so if you look at this edge here, right, so it's flush on the bottom, but not necessarily on the top. So that makes sure, again, when you have all four of your legs and you're ripping it on the table saw to the finished width, that you're ripping them all four at the same time. Because again, chances of you setting up to 2 5/8 today, coming back and ripping the other two tomorrow to the exact same measurement is kind of slim. So what you want to do is have all of them ripped at the same time. So if you do make a mistake, well, you won't be downgraded on ripping it to the wrong width and for having your corners done. So say if you ripped them to 2 1/2, but that's fine. I mean, you'll lose a couple points there for ripping, but when it comes time to assemble them, you're going to have a flush edge. So that's going to be all right. So you have that. Some things to keep in mind too is making sure that you have a clean cut. So like on this surface, you can see you have that notch. So where the chop saw actually came down, and then I moved it again and made the second cut. Okay, so when you guys make your cut, make sure you have a nice flat edge. However, don't cut too fast, because if you end up just, the saw is up to speed, and then you slam that down, what you're going to do is actually going to get some tear out. Okay, so you're not allowing the saw to cut freely. You're basically forcing it to cut faster than it can handle the material. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't. I mean, you don't have to sit there and take 2 minutes to make one cut, but it doesn't need to be slammed down. Okay, because otherwise you'll get tear out. Another thing that if you guys watched the video was making sure that you hold the material tight against the fence. So if this is the fence of the chop saw, this is my material to be cut, I want to hold it tight this way so that when I cut, it doesn't actually kick it out. Because that's going to be a tendency, since we're cutting at an angle, it actually the saw is actually going to want to push that the material out of the way because it's going at a miter. Okay, so it's a miter cut, and it's actually going to push it. So you want to make sure that you hold it tight. Make sure that the table is clean underneath there. And when you're laying it out, remember that your final overall shape is going to be a trapezoid. Okay, so that's when go back to watching those videos. You know, making sure you want what face is going to be your outside face. So start figuring on that or focusing on that. Make sure you have a trapezoid. Again, I've seen this a lot of times. You guys they don't mark out the corners or which way the blade goes, and then you end up getting this. All right, so then you have to go back and recut your miters, which then eventually is not going to be the overall length or the finished length. So all you need to do for that is, for laying that out, if you guys watch that video, you just need to draw a pencil mark to help you know what way it's going. It doesn't need to be exactly at 45. It just needs to be there to help you remember which way it needs to go. Also, paying attention to your thickness. Okay, so if I don't plane my boards at the same time, okay, I may have a nice tight miter over here. Guys, keep your hands to yourself. I might have a nice tight miter over here, but if I didn't plane them down at the same time, they're going to be a different thickness. And on the inside, you're going to have this gap, okay, which is then going to play in. You're going to have to take into account, because your rabbets on the outside, you want to make sure that you have a nice a square rabbet, so that when your edges fit down in there, that it's nice and tight. Okay. So thickness, planning a thickness, that's today's answer. You know, thickness you want to make sure you pay attention to, ripping it to the correct width, and taking your time when you're cutting the miters. So again, you want to have a nice tight miter so that when you assemble this, it's tight here. Okay, that's one of the things that you'll be graded on. Also making sure that you have your edges are flush. Okay. So this is one of the things I forgot to show you, is you guys can kind of see how the end right here actually kind of swoops up, so it's not a nice tight joint. And it's actually going to look kind of, I mean, yeah, there's a gap. It's only about a 32nd of an inch, but you're still able to see it, right? Whereas with this joint here, right, I fit those together. That's a nice tight joint. Okay, so that's what you're going to be looking for. Making sure that you have your miters, taking your time with that and everything like that. Okay, so the other thing I want to make sure you guys are doing is taking time to actually watch those videos. So now you can turn off both the lights.
Got it.
Okay, so what I'm doing here is, this is how I'm actually going to be grading you. So this is one of the main points. The video before this that you guys are supposed to watch was talking about squaring the ends. So we're not necessarily squaring them, we're cutting a miter on the ends. So what I did here is, if you look at this board, this is how all your boards should be. So you're going to take all your boards, cut a miter on one side, or on one end, and then what you're going to do is then go ahead and cut them all to length. So all 4 of your boards are going to look like this one on the left here. Have a miter on your best end. Why would I want to do it on the best end and not the worst end? Yeah, because then I'll cut off the rest of it. If I have some, maybe there's a big knot or a big crack or something is kind of funky up here on this end. If I cut off the best end as my first cut, right? So I'm going to measure this here, measure up 13 inches or whatever the final length is going to be. This is where 13 inches falls. I'm going to make that miter, and all this junk is going to be cut off. So that's why when I cut, I want to make or square off my end or cut my miter. I want to cut on my best end because I want to keep the best material. If this is all junk here, I want to try and cut the majority of that off. So again, all 4 of your legs, you're going to miter the best end to a 45, cut the first one to length, and then what I'm doing here is I'm actually marking it. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm making sure that both ends are on a flat surface and that it's straight up and down. Okay, so it's completely vertical. It's not tipped at an angle this way, because if I do it that, right, it's the same thing as like a triangle on or a hypotenuse on a triangle. The hypotenuse is longer than one of the legs. So I want to make sure that it's straight up and down so I get an accurate measurement. Okay. I'm going to mark this to length, the same length as the one that's cut to the finish length, so that when it comes time to actually assemble it, I'm going to have a square box. Okay. So again, it's going back to if I made a mistake, say it was 13 inches and I actually cut it at 12.5. All right, so you'll lose some points there, but you're not going to lose points because your box is then square. So it goes back to if you make a mistake, you're making a mistake on all of them, and it's going to be easier to correct rather than having them all be a different size, different dimension, trying to piece it together. Right? You can have all of them that look the same. So you're going to cut this one to length here, mark it, and then we'll go from there. Any questions on cutting your miters? Okay. All right, what I'm going to do is you guys can head out into the shop and I'll go over what the responsibilities are.